Good morning, everybody. Good morning, good morning, good morning. I'm Jake Sherman. I'm the founder of Punchbowl News. Great to see everybody here this morning. And welcome to those in person and who are watching online and on C-SPAN or wherever you're watching. This is our pop-up conversation with French Hill, Republican from Arkansas and the chair of the Financial Services Committee. Luckily, nothing is going on in public markets today, so we're gonna relax and talk about other things. A big thank you to the Small Business Payments Alliance for making this conversation possible. So we'll cover a lot of news of the day with the chairman and digital payments and small business affairs. And afterwards, Richard Hunt, the executive chair of the Electronic Payments Coalition, will join us for a fireside chat. As always, you can find Punchbowl News on all social media channels at Punchbowl News, and we encourage you to share this conversation, especially share how great of a job I'm doing or anything nice you want to say about me, because social media doesn't have enough niceness in my view. With that, I'd like to welcome Chairman French Hill to the stage. Morning. You know, Mr. Chairman, they were holding up "We love the chairman" signs in the audience before you got here. That we made them put them away so we could have a conversation. Okay, so we're going to start with a couple quick news of the day questions before we get started. It is not yet, the markets are not yet open, but we're expecting a huge day in the markets, a very interesting day in the markets. After the president put in across them, I don't know if you want to call them across the board or reciprocal tariffs on a whole host of nations yesterday. What should we expect in equity markets this morning?
Well, good morning, everybody. Jake, good to be with you. First, I think this is probably the most anticipated back and forth that we've had in economic policy in months in Washington, maybe years in Washington, meaning President Trump campaigned on this, President Trump's talked about this constantly. His strategy has gone back and forth. He's changed his views. So I think a lot of this is built into the markets over the last few weeks, frankly.
We better hope so.
Yeah, and so I think I don't think the markets have been optimistic about where this is going.
Right. I want to shift gears for a second and talk about the House of Representatives, in which you serve and are a key member. House is somewhat frozen right now after Mike Johnson sent you guys out of session this week. I'm sure you have a week full of a packed schedule this week. You were supposed to be in session all week. House was sent home. Do you over a dust-up over proxy voting for new mothers and fathers? Do you think he can get this thing unfrozen and unstuck?
I do. I have confidence in Mike Johnson that this was, I think, the right thing to do. That if you're going to take down this rule, people need to pay a price. This has been a plaguing. I've been in Congress 10 years. This is my 5th speaker. So it's
When are you going to be speaker?
Yeah, I don't think so. Yeah, I like a job with more certainty. But Mike Johnson's doing a good job. He's worked hard. He's brought the conference together, and look at the victories that he's had, and this is not political talking points. People said he couldn't get a budget reconciliation bill done. He did. People said that you couldn't get a CR done. He did, and in both instances, clearly the Senate didn't think that was true either. So I think Mike Johnson needs to be given some street cred for the good job he's doing, and he inherited this issue of, well, we're just going to take down a rule. You can't run the House of Representatives doing that in the majority party, and I think this is the message: is that while that's happened, it's true over the last 2 Congresses, Mike Johnson wants to bring an end to it. So we'll see what his strategy is for doing that. But I support not turning the House over to the discharge petition.
Let's creep into policy here. Reconciliation is, we're on the brink, we're in the middle, I guess, of reconciliation, or at the opening stages. The Senate is moving on its budget this week. It should be coming to the floor today. The House presumably will move to that budget resolution next week. What is your realistic timeline for getting it done, number one? Let's start with that. What is your realistic timeline?
Well, I think politicians in the House and Senate, the members, want this done as soon as possible. They saw and President Trump wants it done as soon as possible, both for the same reason. So they're in alignment on this, in my judgment. Speaker Ryan thought to use the savings from a successful Obamacare reform to pay for tax cuts, so we did health care first in President Trump's first term, and President Trump, believes that to have been a mistake, in addition to it didn't work.
It was a mistake, yeah.
And therefore, that delayed tax cuts until the end of the year, and from a political point of view, people couldn't get the benefit politically of campaigning on the economic benefits of the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act. So I think people in both the House and Senate and the Trump administration want to move as fast as possible. Fortunately, the House moved in the one bill, which I think is the right way to do this, where you combine concrete, specific spending cuts with an agreed-upon set of tax incentives. So I still think it should be one bill, but the House has done the hard work by hours and hours and hours of meetings between all voices inside the House to get to where we did on our reconciliation bill, and the Senate has not invested that time. They really haven't. You've got to have members sit in closed-door meetings and figure this out on what they can do on both spending priorities and tax priorities, and it's hard work. And I'd say, I've got more people on my committee than in the entire Senate Republican conference. You'd ought to be able to get them together and have a meeting. I mean, let's get going here. We really want them to recognize that we've done a lot of hard work. We need them to do some hard work too.
Carried interest loophole, will that be closed? That's a priority of President Trump's.
I don't support closing the carried interest loophole. I think that it is an important component for long-term finance across the country in many, many different kinds of businesses, from commercial real estate to venture capital to, yes, private equity, to oil and gas development. I think it's not a money raiser, and I think it is a huge support, and it's not a loophole. I mean, it's simply saying that if investors in a particular matter hit a hurdle rate in a long-term holding of a company, the profits over that hurdle rate are split as capital gain. I just don't understand this, and it's been heavily politicized, but in my view, it's a long-term investment management tool, and it's good for the country, actually, in terms of jobs, corporate development, business development, long-term investment incentives. It aligns long-term ownership and profit and capital gain and business growth and investment in a right way, I think.
Let's shift into the conversation today. This is your first term as chair of the Financial Services Committee. You took over for Patrick McHenry, and a string of pretty serious, you and McHenry both are serious policy people, think a lot about policy, public policy and politics. What could we expect? Give us the 30,000-foot view. What could we expect from you this term?
Well, this is important. I believe very much in when you have the presidency and you have the Senate and the House, you have an opportunity to make law in a number of areas. And so my philosophy in running the committee is that each of our subcommittees of priorities, from housing to digital assets, crypto topic, to financial institutions, to capital markets, should all have an opportunity to make law. So we've asked our members to have priorities in each of those committees of what bills they want to see enacted into law. And then my admonition to them is, where's your Senate companion? What are you doing with the subcommittee chair in the Senate? How are you looking at this and coordinating with on a bicameral basis? And then are these priorities for the Trump administration? And if we find that, to quote Kamala Harris, perfect Venn diagram, where all that overlaps nicely, that will lead to legislation, and it will lead to laws headed to President Trump's desk, and it will lead to better economics, better capital access, better, more functioning capital markets, more affordable housing, and a regulatory framework for digital assets. So we have a big agenda. I'm excited about it. Our subcommittee chairmen are really excited about it, and we're going to get some serious work done this 2 years.
Let's talk about, you just came off of a 13, 15-hour markup.
Who's counting?
Who's counting is right.
Somebody went home, but somebody didn't.
Yeah, you were not one of the ones that did. On a stablecoin bill, this is this has been talked about in your committee back in McHenry, not back, but just a couple years ago with Chairman McHenry. Give us what is the goal in this effort, and what do you see as the key sticking points in getting it reconciled with the Senate, which has its own ideas?
Right. Well, first, we would not have made the progress we've made on innovation in this economy from education in Congress, how fintech plays a role in our society in the future, the benefits of blockchain as an operating system if we hadn't had leadership from Patrick McHenry as chairman of our committee. And I will also give credit to our former chair, Maxine Waters, who during her term, but this is pre-pandemic, dealt with fintech. She set up a fintech and AI task force. I served as the Republican lead for it. So she's been right there learning this as well. So this committee has had a head start in understanding the benefits of blockchain, Web3, and fintech and financial services. So last night was a culmination. We passed a bipartisan stablecoin bill out of the House. I think it makes significant improvements over the Senate bill that was led by my good friend Bill Hagerty and Cynthia Loomis and Tim Scott and others, Jill LeBrand and Elsa Brooks. Both are good bills. I think the House bill is better because we've had 2 years of experience in working through these issues. And we've thought heavily about them, and we've had tremendous member engagement. I mean, this is a truly bipartisan product. I can't say enough thanks to members like Richie Torres, Jim Himes, Josh Gottheimer, and others who have worked so intensively with us to get this legislation right.
Bill Hagerty was your college. You went to college with him, right? Is that right?
We did. Do you
have any good stories you could share about anything stupid he did?
I do, but that'll be used in conference.
Yeah. You had 6 Democrats supporting the Stable Act last night. Is that enough to give you some leverage with the Senate?
I think it really demonstrates that, once again, we have solid bipartisan support in the House. We saw that in FIT last year, our market structure bill, which we'll be taking up. We have our first hearing next week on that. We'll be releasing text on a market structure bill in the next few weeks that'll build on the success we had last year, where 71 Democrats voted with the Republicans to advance for the first time a regulatory market structure bill for digital assets. Last night's vote was a good vote. We had a vote I expected, who's worked hard on this bill, Brittany Peterson. From Colorado, she was not there last night. I'm not going to say she would have been a yes vote, but she was a yes vote last year, and she's worked very hard on this bill before. So I think it was a good vote. I think it shows that we've got a solid bipartisan support, good text, and I think that gives us leverage in working on a conference with the Senate. But let me be clear to the audience and to you, passing a stablecoin bill is not something to go like, run out to the center of the field. These bills work together. You're not crafting the venture ecosystem for Web3 in financial services unless we pass both these bills.
Market structure
and stables. If you just have a stablecoin bill, you have an interesting thing that you can't use anywhere in the United States.
Right.
And so that's why they work integrated. That's been our approach in the House all along. So it's my goal, my legislative goal would be to move both these bills through the House and the Senate and accomplish President Trump's goal of having them signed into law before the August recess.
Let's switch to community banking, which is a passion of yours, something you've been involved with for a long time. You released your Make Community Banking Great Again. I don't know where you got that structure from.
Weird, yeah.
It's weird how that happens. You released
Ronald Reagan.
Yeah, that's right. You released that last November. For those who are unfamiliar with that, walk us through some of the core ideas and how you're turning them into legislative action.
Yeah. So community banks are at the heart of our country. Alexander Hamilton told us that our banks are the nurseries of the national wealth. And that's still the case today. And we've seen a tremendous consolidation in banking across the country. When I started my company in the late 1990s in Arkansas, there were 295 banks in Arkansas. There's 70 today. It gives you, and that's a national indication of what kind of consolidation. The consolidation since the financial crisis has been driven not by technology, not by human resources, not by big tech. It's been driven by the cost of compliance and regulatory burden on small companies. Everything has moved up in scale. Why do you not have small public stock offerings? It's too expensive to be a public company. One of the questions I asked my colleagues when I ran for the chairmanship of this committee, I asked the Republican Steering Committee, I said, how many companies are in the Wilshire 5000 index? They know it's kind of a Grant's Tomb question. I said, do you think it's 5,000?
Yeah, I was going to say it's probably not 5,000.
How many do you think it is?
I don't know.
3,700. We don't have enough public companies to qualify to create the Wilshire 5,000. So both in capital markets, in becoming a public company, and in community banking, we've driven down the returns by regulatory burden, and we've driven up the demand that you be an enormous company to have competitive returns. Well, why is that? What's the delta? The delta is the burden the United States government, through Sarbanes-Oxley, through Dodd-Frank, puts on small businesses. So the theme in making community banking great again is, first, tailor regulations. And everybody says, oh, it's just a talking point. It's not a talking point. We should say that a community banking company is, I'd say $50 billion, not 10. Inflation has brought that up, and you can run a $50 billion bank. Sounds like a big number to all of us ordinary Americans, but between inflation and running community banks that you put in a company, that's not an enormous business. So if we move up the definition of a community bank, move up in law, definition of a regional bank, and then et cetera, you're going to get more tailored regulation, and that's a top goal for community banks that want to stay in business, from $31 million bank down in Bearden, Arkansas, all the way up to a much bigger, more complex public company. So that's a key point. And then fair exams, exam harmonization. This is a goal for Treasury Secretary Bessent as well. We're way off track. The Biden administration was not a good manager in the federal regulatory space. You all know about the Gary Gensler mismanagement. But in the banking space, we don't have harmonization of those rules. They've raised the cost. They've made it very expensive. And so we're going to tackle this. And a whole bunch of other ideas you can read on our website. And we're going to move that through committee. Last night, we marked up Andy Barr of Kentucky's good bill on de novo banking, which allows a startup bank to phase into their total capital standard over a 3-year period. And when I travel to see startup banks all over the country, there are not many. They can all fit in a dining room. We don't have startup banks in this country anymore because of what I've just described. I met 2 in Miami a couple of weeks ago. They worked 3 years to do it. I saw one in Dallas the other day. So they're there, but they're microscopic, and we want to make sure that we have dynamism in the banking market.
And small business lending is also a big component of community banks.
It is.
What kind of proposals do you foresee to help small businesses access capital, especially, well, we'll see what happens with the economy and with the climate, but that's an important component, I imagine.
Look, there are a lot of small businesses that have taken advantage of fintech and access good, workable, working capital through a fintech, online type lending platform. That's true. I'm not going to take anything away from that. But we have we have counties in this country that have no physical location of a bank. That's a growing number. I owned a bank in the Mississippi Delta. It's a very poor region of the nation. There are places where we have no cell service and we have no broadband. So it's a little hard to bank on your phone, like everybody here in the elites, East Coast, in a punch bowl event. Nothing says elite like a punch bowl.
Hey, we did one in Little Rock not long ago. So.
Yeah, I know. I got the invitation, but I was out of town.
Yeah, funny how that works. We had senators there. So.
Yeah, I know. Yeah, we wouldn't want to disrupt them from their work. So we need community banking out there to reach small business and have credit access. And I know this is controversial for some who believe that the CFPB is like, biblically important. But the 1071 rule is probably the most commented on thing I get when I travel the country with small business owners and small business lenders. The 1071 rule takes the Home Mortgage Disclosure Act on anti-discrimination data collecting and imposes that on small business lending. And so if you're if you're not involved in finance, what's wrong with that? We don't want discrimination in small business lending. Yeah, well, that's right, we don't. And by the way, it's illegal. It's illegal to do that. But a 1 to 4 family home mortgage covered by the Home Mortgage Disclosure Act is the most simple, straightforward, homogeneous product in finance. It is what you would say a cookie cutter product. So to compare two borrowers to make sure they were treated fairly and equally is a pretty straightforward task. There is nothing more heterogeneous, different, confusing, and every one of them as unique as a small business loan. So I view this as a way to punish the banking system. It's going to get people will leave the small business lending space. Borrowers will come in and not tell the truth. They'll say, well, it's a real estate loan. So it won't be coded a small business loan. It's just going to create a terrible dislocation. And what's the end result? People who will borrow online from some non-depository institution. And once again, government regulations have forced good, profitable, community, family-oriented, local businesses away from their community bank.
Let's talk about outbound investment reform, something that's been in front of your committee for a long time. Last Congress was a big issue. A big one for Wall Street, for investors of all shapes and sizes. The president last night, in his tariff announcement, took some action on that and seemed to kind of brush Congress aside. Andy Barr has a bill on this, released it a couple weeks ago. What is the state of play on outbound investment reform?
So outbound investment reform is complicated. We want to get it right. We had a Biden administration executive order that people thought was too vague and not specific enough and not giving the right guidance. Senator Cornyn had a bill that essentially codified that Biden executive order. So the House went to work last year with the Foreign Affairs Committee and the House Financial Services Committee.
No turf wars there, right?
Oh, never. To try to find a common ground product on what's the purpose? How can you limit American corporate or investors in very sensitive dual-use technologies in China? It doesn't say China necessarily, but outside the U.S., China being the main issue. President Trump his people have a study on this to report to the president by April 28th on what their proposal is. Chairman Barr has put in his draft bill, which has got a Senate companion. I think Senator Cornyn introduced a similar text in the Senate. So we're just going to try to work through this and see if we can get it right. What's the controversy? You can't say you can't invest with anyone who's a Chinese person in AI, right? I mean, think about it. Let that sink in for a minute. Well, what does that mean? Everything has AI in it. What if it's not? And AI is a dual-use technology. So think about trying to write that down to say what you mean. What Chairman Barr's idea is, don't put the burden on the private sector. If the government has a concern, name names. Make it a bright line test. Green light, red light. We don't want you to invest in AI that's related to military robotics with this company. Right. And that's the debate, and I think you'll see it continue. But look, there is bicameral, bipartisan alignment to do this. We just need to get the words right on paper.
Credit Card Competition Act, which has been also lingering in the backdrop of Congress now for some time, back into last Congress. Senators Durbin and Marshall in the House, so Lofgren, Lance Gooden, a member of your committee, I believe.
Formerly.
Formerly. Again, funny how that works. You've been vocal in opposing this bill. Lay out some of your main concerns.
Yeah. Well, first, big picture. I just philosophically don't support government mandated price controls. That's just a philosophical point for me. Republicans ran a whole campaign last year in the presidential election against Vice President Harris's suggested rent controls and price controls that the Biden administration offered ideas on. I led with Senator Scott a Congressional Review Act resolution that's pending to go back to the House floor now to stop the CFPB's arbitrary $5 limit on overdraft protection fees. I just don't believe in government price controls. That's number one. Number two, I think it's very challenging for Congress to try to referee between two very large community anchors, retailing, banking. It's very hard for them to do that. Why don't you guys go work this out? Thirdly, this was tested in the courts, and there was a settlement. I thought that would kind of bring an end to the whole thing, but it didn't. So those are my thoughts. It's a tough issue for a lot of members, but that's my philosophy on it, and then I think that's something that the industries ought to work out for themselves and bring a solution to Congress rather than trying to have Congress referee between the industries.
Critics of the act, including the Bank Policy Institute, credit union groups, argue it could hurt community banks and credit unions by cutting revenue streams, potentially forcing them to slash rewards or hike fees.
Yeah.
Do you share that view, and how does this impact smaller financial institutions?
Well, I think we have empirical evidence of it. The Durbin Amendment that was jammed into the Dodd-Frank Act that related to debit interchange fees, the assertion was if you do this, bank customers will not be impacted in any way, and we will pass on the lack of an interchange fee and lower prices. There have been numerous studies that says that's just not true. I know so many banks that are over $10 billion that lost the interchange fee revenue source, and they no longer have free checking. They nickel and dime for everything in retail accounts, which they had avoided doing under using the benefit of the interchange fee to offer a cheaper base consumer family access to checking account and other services. So I think that argument has merit.
And so on the consumer side, there's talk of the loss of credit card rewards and fraud protections if this passes. So how do you weigh that against the downsides, the argument that it could lower costs for merchants? The swipe fees they pay in the U.S. are a lot higher than other places.
Well, don't think I'm not empathetic with small business and merchant fees and things like that. I am. I'm just saying this isn't the way to resolve it. And I think competition is always a better way to do it. And I've suggested, I think last night was a big night on the way for greater competition in payments. Last night, the House advanced the stablecoin legislation on a bipartisan vote. The Senate did that a few weeks ago. And over time, I think you'll see a blockchain payment rail that will be competitive because it will be less costly, will be more accurate both on the fraud issue and who the customer is, and obviously tremendously cheaper in a cross-border context. So we'll see what happens, but I think competition is the real answer there, and I respect the concerns of major retailers big time. I do, and I understand the oligopoly nature of card networks and the card issuance business, but I think competition is the right answer.
So the CFPB, which you mentioned before, which Republicans have lots of interesting feelings on and emotions about, was active on it.
Democrats do too.
Yeah, oh, they do. It's for sure. They were active in the Biden administration on issues like airline reward miles, which I'm a big fan of, and late fees. Although not directly on interchange fees. How do you see the CFPB fitting into this broader financial policy debate under this administration?
Well, we'll see. We've got to see.
Like a lot of things.
Yeah, yes. We've got to get President Trump's executives confirmed by the Senate for these important financial regulatory agencies. The names that have been offered, and some have completed their hearing process, are great. And I think they'll do a really fine job. We're lacking a nominee from the president on the FDIC, and I certainly hope that comes soon. It's on my daily checklist to see how that's coming.
And how is it coming?
I don't know. Last time I looked at my daily, it was not coming fast enough for me, because that's how we coordinate policy development in the executive branch with the legislative on how best to use the CFPB in that context.
We have to wrap it there, Mr. Chairman.
Great to be with you.
Richard Hunt is going to come up, and I told Tim beforehand, he has the Speaker from Louisiana and the House Majority Leader. You have, what, 3 committee chairmen from Arkansas?
Yeah, well, we have all of our delegation hold a gavel, and we have 3 in the House, but we're proud of Tom Cotton in Senate leadership and chairing the Intel Committee, and delighted to see John Bozeman chair the Ag Committee. So,
but I think Louisiana wins there.
Well, I don't know. We're on our, as I say, those are both very tough jobs. And when Richard comes up, I hope you have simultaneous translation.
Thank you, sir.
Good to see you. Appreciate it.
Now, Richard Hunt to the stage. So will you take that Arkansas, Louisiana shade?
Don't forget, we also have the majority leader, the House of Representatives.
I said that.
You did say that? So that's Arkansas will catch up one year. It's always good.
So as the first executive chairman of the Electronic Payments Coalition and a longtime leader in this space, you've seen how payment technology has evolved. Give us a quick overview of why credit card payments have been, and as a small business owner, I can tell you why it's been important for me, but why it's been important for small businesses overall.
Yeah, so I took over this job almost 2 years ago, and as you get older in life, you like to, at the end of the day, count how many mistakes you made.
I don't do that.
Yeah, and how many things you got right. I was astonished about how many people now rely on credit cards over cash when I really got immersed into this. 53 billion transactions happen per year on credit card transactions. Jake, let me ask you a question, how average you are.
I'm very average.
Let me ask the audience as well. I want you to think about it. How many credit cards do you have? Think about that number. How many times do you use it per year? Think about that number. Jake, how many credit cards do you have?
I think 5.
You have 5. Average American has 4.
So I'm above average.
You are above average.
So my mom always told me.
So
not my wife, though.
This is dangerous. How many times do you use your credit card per year? 365 days. Start from there. What is your number, Jake?
Has to be 700 something.
700. Think about your number. The average number is 250 times.
But are we counting my wife as me using my credit card?
That's up to you.
Because then we're talking about 50, 60,000, yeah.
So look, those are all the good numbers. But the bad numbers are this. There are some bad people in this world. 2 million attacks per day for your data and for cyber attacks. Think about how much billions of dollars the credit card industry has to spend. And you don't think twice about using your credit card.
No.
It doesn't matter if you're in Paris, Texas, or Paris, France. You swipe it, and look, I'm just going to admit to you all, I have no earthly idea how the credit card really works. You swipe it, and it goes through 9 channels. And it comes back and says, approved.
Yeah.
You just swipe it, and you go on, and you don't think twice about it.
No.
It's magical in many ways.
And one thing we hear a lot about credit cards is efficiency. A gym owner might rely on auto pay. I have auto pay at my gym, so I can forget how much I'm paying for it, to ensure steady cash flow without chasing down clients or customers for checks or cash. How do credit cards streamline operations for small businesses compared to handling physical cash?
So yeah, I think I pay my $350 subscription to
Punchbowl News.
Punchbowl using my credit card because I want to get the miles as well. So last night I had the great opportunity to spend some time with entrepreneurs, both from Louisiana and Mississippi. One couple, George and Stacy, have a catering business. One of their stores also is at Lakefront Airport. I hope you visit there. They use
Lakefront Airport is only for private flights, so I don't think I'm going to be visiting.
Yeah, but you'd be surprised. They have a restaurant there where they have standing line only.
Oh, really?
Coming in for people to have brunch on the weekends.
Wow.
So it's a destination, not just for airplanes and for airports. It's for the constituents of New Orleans, Louisiana. You got to get out more. Yeah. But they use their credit card for floating. Obviously, they buy a lot of supplies for their catering business. And then they use those points to send their customers, their employees, to attend educational seminars.
Yep.
And then Anna Kate, I was with her from Vicksburg. She owns a bed and breakfast, basically. She started her business a couple years ago, and that's how she got a loan, basically, was using her credit card as well.
Well, when we started Punchbowl News, the first thing, among the first things we did was apply for a credit card.
Use it as access to credit.
Yeah, well, just as to help payments. I mean, and it was attached to my personal credit card for a long time, which was an interesting dynamic, which we've since broken. We've since broken that link.
Jake, the other thing, I was sitting next to a nutritionist, and I ordered calamari. And she kind of looked at me. That wasn't the best thing to do in front of a nutritionist. But she's starting her business as well. So that's how her customers pay her.
Yeah. Talk about security. Fraud protection on credit cards is, I mean, probably better now than it's ever been before.
Yeah. So when I first started this endeavor, I thought we'd all talk about fraud and security. That would be the number one reason people would contact members of Congress. But you guys expect that. You demand it. So it's almost an automatic thing that we provide security and fraud protection. Like I told you, 2 million hits per year. Artificial intelligence. It's done a lot of great in the world, but it can be dangerous.
For sure.
The criminals are now using artificial intelligence to hack into your accounts. So what do we have to do? We have to use artificial intelligence to stop that from happening. But no doubt about it, every single day we spend the billions of dollars each and every year to make sure you're safe and secure with your credit cards.
And many small business owners use credit card rewards.
Of course they do.
To invest in their operations, cashback, travel rewards. Talk about how these tools are tools for growth for some of these companies.
Yeah, so we talk about the 2010 Durbin Amendment, and a lot of things have changed in this country over the last 15 years, including, I guess, audio.
Yeah, right.
To do that.
That's called the Star Wars effect.
It is amazing to me how addicted Americans are to points.
Yeah.
Not just credit card points, debit points, McDonald's points, Chipotle points, as well as I get my double protein when I hit 700 points. Americans rely on their points, not just for miles to travel the country and travel the world. Well, one thing that we found out in our stats, and most of you here today, I bet you when you look at your point system, you use your points for airline miles. What about cash back? So if you don't mind, if I can do a survey.
Sure.
How many people the question is cash back or reward miles? How many of you use it for reward miles? What about cash back? Okay, I would have missed that. I would have thought 90% of this audience would have been reward miles. But those people making under $75,000, Jake, 90% of them use it for cash back. Mostly to pay down grocery prices and gasoline prices. They use it mostly twice a year. What are the guesses? When do they use it twice a year for cash back for major purchases? Right, back to school.
Okay.
And holiday season.
Oh, I started to say Christmas shopping.
Yeah, right. It's expensive out there here for back to school supplies.
Yes, it is.
The average American spends $1,100 on back to school supplies. What the hell is going on with that? $1,100.
That is above my pay grade.
Yeah.
Let's talk about the Credit Card Competition Act.
Okay, you didn't call it right. It's called the Durbin-Marshall Credit Card Mandate Bill.
That's what you call it.
Yes.
They call it, well, let's go by the official name.
Yeah.
How does that threaten reward programs, and what would that mean for small businesses?
So first off, do not underestimate this threat by Durbin and Marshall. I will give them credit. They are relentless.
They are.
Trying to work on behalf of the corporate mega stores. Look, this is Target, Walmart, Home Depot. They're the ones who are funding this operation for the other side. We're taking this extremely seriously. You got to go back to 2010. I understand, just looking at it in your audience, not everybody was around in 2010.
I was.
You got to understand what Dick Durbin did on the floor of the United States Senate. His effort had never been through any committee, no hearings, no studies, nothing. This was during the Dodd-Frank, which was going to become Dodd-Frank. He literally took a sheet of paper, less than the number of pages you have in your notes, went to the floor of the United States Senate, started trying to secure votes with scratch-off and write-in items to secure votes. My wife was on the floor, working for Senator Carper at the time, and literally watched him do this to secure votes. Yes, the banking industry was at the lowest time in its reputational tenure, right after the financial meltdown. We didn't think he'd have the 60 votes. We thought he was around 56, 57. We underestimated the Dodd-Frank, the bailout, the bank bailout vote and everything else, and he got 62 votes.
Yep.
So now he's back on credit cards. So to say that the community banks, credit unions, large banks, networks, airlines, and unions are not paying attention this time is the understatement of the world.
Yep.
So we're all in on this because we know it would affect credit card points. There used to be a time you got credit card reward points on your debit card. That's where most Americans went, were the debit card, not the credit card. That bill passed, that amendment passed. Free checking went away, as French said. Debit cards reward points went away. The same thing could happen if this bill were ever to pass. And we know that 80% of all Americans who have credit cards rely on points. So this is a significant threat. I have no doubt whatsoever that the viability of airlines would be in jeopardy as well, and everybody's points. And think about all these travel and tourism states. You just went to Las Vegas for the second time to watch the dead.
I did.
Las Vegas, Reno, Phoenix.
We could talk about that for a little bit.
California, Florida. Those are major tourism states.
Yeah.
15 million folks flew around the country last year using reward points.
So talk about the threats of community banks and the broader financial industry. What are some unintended consequences in your view?
Yeah, look, no doubt about it. Durbin and Marshall tried to buy off the community banks and credit unions by saying banks under $100 million would be exempt. They also did the same thing in 2010, $10 billion and below. Hogwash. It doesn't work. That's why the community banks and credit unions, this is their top issue, because they know probably it would lead to a consolidation of banking once again. More people could go to larger banks, away from credit unions and community banks. That's why they're all in. They're one of the leaders of EPC.
We gotta wrap after this, but if you had one message for our audience, people out here, people watching on C-SPAN, on the live stream, about why credit card payments matter more than ever, what would it be?
Well, thank goodness the credit card was around during COVID. How many small businesses relied on the credit card? People are just moving away from cash. Credit cards are part of your everyday, daily operations in your life. Small businesses use it daily as well. That's another thing I miss, how reliant small businesses are using the credit card. It is safe and it is secure.
We are all out of time. Thank you so much for joining us, and a big thank you to French Hill and the Small Business Payments Alliance for partnering with us to make this conversation possible. And thank you to Richard for this conversation. We have another event with August Pfluger next week focused on investing in America and private capital. I think that's me too. You can check out punchbowl.news and our events page to learn more. Thank you very much and have a great day.
Yeah.